Welcome to the Masons Podcast, your source of insight and innovation in New Zealand building and construction. Each episode explores the products, systems and solutions that support trades, specifiers and developers to deliver high-quality, durable and efficient buildings across Aotearoa, New Zealand. From building envelope performance to flooring, acoustics and fire separation systems, we share practical knowledge and ideas that help shape the built environment.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to one of Mason's informative podcasts where you can learn about what products and systems that Masons supply to assist you in your builds. Today, we're going to unpack what the Mason's Enviro Cladding System is, how it works, and why taking a system approach to external walls makes more sense than ever these days. When we look at a building from the outside, it's easy to focus on aesthetics, the lines and materials and the finish. But what really matters is what that wall is doing every single day. It's standing up to wind and rain. It's managing heat, controlling moisture, quietly protecting everything and everyone inside. And when those layers aren't working together, that's where problems start. Moisture risk increases, thermal performance drops, and comfort suffers. That's why taking a coordinated system approach changes the whole conversation. Instead of hoping that separate components will perform, you design the wall to function as one integrated envelope, reducing risk, improving durability, and it delivers predictable performance over time. Because good envelope design isn't just about compliance, it's about comfort, well-being, and it's about building confidence into every layer of the home. So I'm here with Arthur Whitfield, the Technical Manager from Masons New Zealand Limited. How are you this morning?
Oh, good. Thank you, Michelle. Good to be here again.
Great. Good to see you. Can you start by telling us a bit about Masons Enviro Cladding and how it came about for Masons?
Right. So the Masons Enviro Cladding System is based on the Enviro AAC panel with various battens, fastenings, embedded mesh, and then layers of render or plaster and coats of paint. How it came about was that the owner of the business, as some of you may know from previous pods, is a bricklayer from a bricklaying family and originated in Australia, where there is a lot of plaster over brick. So after Trent established his bricklaying businesses in New Zealand, he decided to develop the plaster over brick side of things in New Zealand, in Auckland especially. The system spread into the Enviro Cladding System, and also plaster over block and over tilt panel and all sorts of sort of derivatives.
So when people hear Enviro Cladding, what exactly is it? Is it just another exterior panel? Is there something special about it?
The Enviro panel itself, the AAC panel that we're referring to here, is 50 millimetres thick, 2200 millimetres long by 600. The Enviro system is a code mark system, and part of that means that the factory is inspected, in this case every year, in terms of quality records, consistency, making it to standards and all that sort of thing. So the panel itself is a high quality material. When you put it together with all the other bits and pieces, which we're going to touch on later, you have a high performance, long lasting, aesthetically pleasing cladding system.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so that's the Enviro Cladding as a product, but what actually makes up the Enviro Cladding system? Like, can you tell us what are the components that turn it into a complete exterior wall?
Right, so starting from the framing out, so over the framing there will be an underlay, whether that be a mason's underlay or another one that's been specified. You will then have battens to create the cavity. Now, typically it's timber framing, and typically these are high-density polystyrene battens. Timber battens are also an option, as are if people want a wider cavity for increased, drainage and drying, you can elect to go with a 45mm cavity, and then we have a particular kind of timber cavity batten that's used there. Then you have the panel that we've obviously talked about. The panel is held onto the framing, screwed through the battens into the framing using large Type 17, either galvanised or stainless steel screws, depending on the corrosion zone. And then we're out to the end of the panel. The panels are mortared together using Mason's Enviro glue. So Mason's, some people may consider it an old-fashioned system. We consider it a very time-tested, very proven system. What am I saying? The fact that it's more together. There are sort of like some other systems that use different systems of bonding the panels. Yep. We like the Enviro glue and the action that the mortar has. So we come out to the edge of the panel. Now, the plasterer will check the straightness of the panel. They'll often do some sanding, and then they will start applying the plaster coats and embed the mesh, alkali-resistant mesh, especially in the areas that are more prone to cracking as buildings move. After the layers of plaster, depending on the type of plaster chosen, because we have the mineral or cementitious, modified cementitious type, or the acrylic, flexible acrylic types, there may be a lime locker or lime blocking paint coat, and then 2 coats of high build premium acrylic paint. If it's an acrylic plaster, which the top coat of the plaster is pre-tinted to the chosen colour, there may need to be 1 coat of premium high build acrylic on top of the tinted plaster. So it kind of depends. And I have left out, I realised, very important part, which is the flashings.
Right.
So around all the openings, there are specific flashings and soakers at the lower corners, and obviously over the head of the windows and at the base of the panel, there are special flashings. So I've rattled off quite a lot of components there. Each one of them has a job to do.
Right. And I've heard you talk about polystyrene cavity battens along the line. Can that be used for the system as well?
High-density polystyrene battens are a very popular use. They are very fast to install. They are relatively cost-efficient, and also they do help with reducing thermal bridging.
Great. Thanks for that, Arthur. So that's the components. How do they all go together?
Basically, when the LPB plasterer turns up, they will hopefully see some nice straight framing, and they will see an underlay. From that point, they will start with battening up. So that's typically, as we mentioned, high-density polystyrene battens. They will either have a peel and stick on the back, or they may glue them on with a suitable construction adhesive. Occasionally, they may also assist that with some nailing, just to make sure those battens stay in place. From that point on, they start in with their panelling. So we're often, when I talk about panel, I'm talking about the Enviro AAC 50mm panel. So this is laid out in a stretcher bond pattern for maximum strength, with the panels interlocking and joining with each other. Their panels are held on with 6 screws per panel minimum, which, as I say, these large Type 17 screws, typically galvanise unless you're in a sea spray zone or a geothermal zone, but you need to go to stainless steel. So these are screwed through the panel, the battens, and into the frame. You need to embed about 10mm typically into the panel. Once the panel is up, the plasterers will place the flashings around the joinery openings, and that's obviously crucial. Now, when you've heard me mention about masons as quite a traditional kind of system, and what we mean by that is that we use the head flashing that comes with the joinery provided by the joinery provider.
Okay.
So that is something for people to keep in mind, to allow for that and to plan for that to be fitted, not to throw those away.
Okay.
Because there are some other systems out there that have a different system at the head, and
Yep,
people are used to chucking
or
away or not ordering the aluminium head flashings from the joinery supplier.
Sure.
So
okay.
note that. Yep. So now we've got panel up, we have got the flashings in place. The plasterer will go around and check for surface straightness, and quite often you will see a little bit of sanding going on. You may occasionally see a little bit of preliminary filling out going on, depending on getting that wall straight from a plaster sense is very important. Once they're ready, they will then go into it with their first coats. Now, the specifier or the developer or the building, the group builder, whoever's commissioned this building, at some point will have had to make a choice whether to go with mineral plaster or polymer modified cementitious plasters, which are very cost effective, but they are very rigid.
Right.
And there are more trips around the house by the plasterer. Or the very flexible, very waterproof acrylic plasters, which are quite a bit more expensive, but there are less trips around the house. So there's less labour and
more flexibility.
I definitely lean that way personally. As a technical manager going to site, the acrylic plaster's performance is incredible. But a lot of people go with mineral because it's good enough and it's very cost effective.
Right.
So the plasterers will do their first coat. That will be either, like in our range, a meshing render or a skimming render, which is a high amount of polymer on it so that it keys in really, really well to the panel.
Sure.
Some plasterers may put a primer coat on first to seal the surface of the panel up to help control suction. That's that business where, basically a whole lot of moisture is sucked out of the plaster.
Sucks it dry.
And that can potentially muck up things if it's out of control.
Yeah. Okay.
So the guys will often mesh it in at that point too, press the mesh into the wet plaster layer at the key points, and then just make sure that's all floated off and really levelled up.
And is that like a fiberglass mesh?
That's right. So it's an alkali-resistant fiberglass mesh that's particularly critical around parts of the building which may be prone to cracking due to building movement.
Sure.
So you're going to ask me what those points are, I'm guessing.
Well, round windows,
Yeah, that's
doors,
right.
yeah.
Anywhere
change
where
of directions.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where cladding's narrow, for example, anywhere where there's likely that movement could express itself in this rigid cladding system. Okay, then they may or may not put a straightening coat. So what I mean by that, like occasionally there might be a need for a little bit more filling out or a little bit of straightening. So they want a perfectly level, flush, flat surface to put the final texture coat on. So if necessary, they will put a very thin skim or meshing render coat over it, and that's a straightening coat.
Okay.
And they go along with these great big floats and make sure everything's perfect. Like my hat's off to the plasterers. It is a super skilled trade. And the finish they achieve, sometimes they turn up, the frames aren't straight, but they really do an incredible job. And once that plaster's dry, they will go back and they will do the texture coat.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the texture coat, popular choice varies, but typically that's a 1 mil texture coat, which is often floated off these days rather than sponged up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we're into, if it's mineral plaster, there's a lime locker or lime blocking coat of paint because fresh cementitious product, potentially you could have lime leach out through the acrylic
Get
top
the white
coats.
look on the outside.
Yep. And once that is dry, they will go around with a chosen colour of premium high build acrylic paint. Very important that the spread rate is observed. So when people push the paint too far, i.e. too thin, wrong spread rate, you will get premature wear and ageing of the paint.
Great. And with the plasterers, do they have to be masons approved to install the system correctly?
Not anymore. We have gone down the track of any experienced LPB plasterer can install the mason system. It's a bit of a mission to be and to stay an LPB plasterer. So if you're an LPB plasterer, you know what you're doing.
Yes.
And you've got a lot of jobs under your belt.
Yeah, they're still got to be registered, so that's
Absolutely.
good.
Yep.
Okay, I know with light colours, dark colours and all the finishes out there, paint choice can really affect performance. So how much should homeowners or architects be considering LRV when picking a colour for Enviro cladding?
Right, so LRV, light reflective value, this refers to the ability of in this case, the paint colour to reflect light back. So why does that matter? The limit or the level that we set for LRV for the Mason's Enviro Cladding System is 25%. No, it's not a percentage, it's just a number.
Okay.
Yeah, LRV is just a number. So LRV is 25. Anything above that, the colours tend to be lighter. They will reflect back more light.
Right.
Below that, they will be darker and they will tend to absorb more light or heat. What we're worried about here is the infrared. So because you've heard me mention that the system is rigid, like aerated autoclave concrete is rigid, and if you've got a mineral plaster, modified cementitious plaster, it is rigid. So we want to minimise solar-driven movement.
Yes.
The sun, expansion and contraction.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to get away from. Now, so for our system, the cutoff is 25. If people want to go below 25, essentially our warranty can't apply because there is a higher risk of solar-driven movement leading to cracking.
So how does Mason's Enviro cladding compare to more traditional exterior systems like you mentioned plastered or bagged brick, which they do a lot of in Australia, solid plaster, tilt slab, there's block?
Aesthetically, from the homeowner or the developer or the group builder, what have you, most of the finishes you've mentioned will essentially look the same from the outside once finished. So the substrate, whether it be tilt panel, whether it be bricks, for either a plaster over a brick or perhaps a bagged brick finish, that is a different look, but certainly has been popular. You have your stepped brick, where you have, some bricks set out and then they're often bagged. So
it's becoming quite popular.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a bold choice. And so from the point of view of the finished, painted up, plastered and painted, cleaned up, walked away system, most clients may not be able to tell. But the choice of substrate can make a difference. In certain parts of the country, there used to be some prejudice against plastered houses. So that is kind of like not as much as it used to be. And in some areas, it was never a thing. They all give a similar finish and fit.
Yeah. Giving you that nice, solid, monolithic finish.
Absolutely.
Which they're looking for.
Yes.
But it's more of medium weight, not lightweight. So that would help in the design.
Right. So if you're talking about the Enviro cladding system, that is a medium weight cladding system.
Yes.
But clearly some of the other things you've mentioned, such as brick, plaster over brick, or bagged brick, or if it's tilt panel, that's obviously a different order of battle. But look, I guess the takeaway is that the Enviro cladding system is a system with panel and components and plasters and paint. And the other things you've mentioned, the Enviro plasters can be taken and repurposed and used to give that look, the plaster, that monolithic, unique look.
Fabulous. Okay. What should people be aware of when choosing a panel and plaster system? Because, as you said, there's been a lot of stigma around it in the past.
Sure. Well, I would never put anybody off. I mean, a plaster house, it's an aesthetic choice. To me, it's magnificent when it's done well and stored well. And, we've got some crafty designers who they're putting it with other elements, like it might be cedar or thermally modified timber, or they might be using some profiled metal or some of the textured fibre cement boards in different orientations. And when they add their paint colours or their finishes, plaster is an amazing foil.
It is.
It's an amazing foil for some dark stained cedar or
a lovely backdrop, a lovely contrast.
Absolutely. So it has its place, I think, aesthetically for that.
And I guess one of the biggest risks is moisture management, which the system does well.
Yes. So look, I mean, let's address that because they mentioned the stigma that some buildings had in certain regions of the country. That's mainly Auckland, possibly Northland, a bit of Bay of Plenty. Not sure about the Waikato. I think Waikato a little bit as well. It goes way back to when we had polystyrene foam claddings directly attached to the framing and then your finishes over the top. And so
no cavity.
No cavity. In some of those jobs, only some of them, water would find its way in and then not be able to find its way out. And as we all know, that's a really bad result for timber frame buildings especially. The systems have been modified, improved, moved on. Specifically, our system is on a drain cavity, either 20 mil or 45 mil cavity. The flashing systems, a lot of attention has been paid to that, and the system has to pass VM1 testing in the testing booth to make sure it is weather tight.
Yeah. I guess another risk is cracking, but that's resolved easily with construction joints.
So I mentioned a few times how the system is rigid, and we do know buildings move. Buildings move for all sorts of reasons. I plead with people, if I get the chance, to put in construction joints wherever they reasonably can around elements that are likely to express cracking. And why do I say that? Because even though it tends to spoil the monolithic look that some people are going for, it will save heartache in a few years down the track when there's been a little bit of movement and a little bit of plaster might have cracked or flaked, and it just saves the cost of having to get someone in to repair that. It's easily repairable.
Yes.
But it just means you've got to get a tradesman back and you may have to do a repaint.
Paint that whole wall. And so why would someone choose this system over other exterior wall options? What are its benefits?
Your first choice would be aesthetics. The reason would be aesthetics. Secondly, there's no downside to choosing a modern mineral or acrylic plaster over AAC panel.
Right.
They're well thought through. They're safe systems. Yes, there is that paint maintenance, what we call that surface maintenance. But apart from that, there is no downside to it. You do pick up a little bit of sound deadening through having a thick 50 millimetre panel on the outside of your wall.
Yes.
And some people even have taken that to a 75 mil panel if they're really looking for better sound control, maybe on a noisy road or something, or next to a kindergarten or something, I don't know. And the other thing is that there is a bit of thermal performance. So a designer can pick up, depending on the quoted performance, about 0.38, but because it's
because you've got a cavity.
Yes, you've got to derate that by 50%.
Okay.
But if you're in Design Navigator and you're making up your wall assembly and you've got to get a certain R value for that wall assembly because of other factors that you're trying to achieve as a designer, it can be something that is helpful.
That's right. It does assist. It doesn't provide nothing, so it can be taken into consideration.
Well, when you're adding all your elements together, including the air gap, you may be able to get to that R value you need because perhaps you've got large picture windows somewhere, I don't know, something else going on.
That you couldn't have with another cladding.
That's correct. So that may be a reason, a factor.
That's a very good reason. And what about wind zones?
All wind zones except SED.
So moisture management, it's historically been a big issue here in New Zealand.
Yes.
Can you walk us through how the Enviro Cladding System manages water and why the drain and ventilated cavity is such a critical part of the design?
I think you've answered your question. Basically, the combination of flashings, the drain ventilated cavity and the weep holes, and the high quality, plaster and paint systems, they exclude the moisture from the outside. The cavity, ventilated and drained, helps get rid of any moisture that should form inside the cavity. It shouldn't be a common occurrence, but it can happen with climatic changes. And previous pods, we've talked about the dew point, interstitial moisture, blah, blah, blah. So that takes care of that. So between the flashings, the exterior coatings, and the drain and drying cavities.
It's a lot about that cavity, isn't it?
It's taken care of.
As we know, thermal requirements under H1 have stepped up significantly lately. So how does the system help designers meet those higher performance targets?
So the 50mm Enviro panel, AAC panel, can give up to about R.38 in terms of like when they're putting their wall assembly into the design navigator. That needs to be derated because it's on a drain-dried cavity.
Sure.
And the cavity itself actually has a bit of an air gap rating, which is also derated.
Right, perfect. So let's talk about the junctions between the AAC panel and other claddings. How do we go about that?
Sure. So in our system manual, we do give some scenarios in terms of how you transition from Enviro cladding to other cladding types. I know this is a major area of concern for territorial authorities, and clearly when you have more than perhaps 2 or 3 cladding types, the risks start to kick up in terms of your facade. So we do give some advice about how to backflash or transition from one flat cladding type to another. Because there's such a myriad of different cladding choices on the market, which is wonderful for designers. They've got so much to choose from. There may be a need to occasionally check in with us or check a design that designers come up with, or even request a detail that we can add to our suite.
Yes.
But we do our best and we sort of give some principles there. But I mean, look, you want a nice, clean visual transition and you want to make sure that there's just no way any water should get, or wind can get where it shouldn't be. I mean, those are the 2 principles that I observe.
Yeah, good detailing. Okay. Let's talk about installation. How practical is the system on site?
Well, as to that, the plastering trade can usually work around the building whilst other trades are doing what they need to do. So the panel is usually dropped off in different locations around the building to try and cut down how much the guys have to carry it around. The guys will pick an area to cut the panel to contain the dust on the offcuts and just carry it to where it needs to be. The type of site actually makes a big difference. So if you're on a flat level site, clearly it's easy for all trades. If you're on a sloping site, if you're on a 2 or 3 story building, things become more complicated. Practicality, it's a modular system. The guys assemble it piece by piece. So you could say that it is very practical and it can be made to flow around other trades or other activities on site.
One thing I guess a lot of our listeners are wanting to know, let's talk about costs. Do you have costs per square metre for the system?
Yeah, well, people might be disappointed, but costs per square metre will change from one location on the country to another. The second thing is that every building site is different. So you've heard me mention single level flat, that's inexpensive. But if you add plastering the bases or plastering the slab therm, PIR board for your slab edge, that's going to add more cost because your plasterer has to spend more time and there's more material. If it's 2nd story or 3 story, if it's sloping, if there's lots of scaffold to climb up and down, the plasterer needs to adjust their costs, their rates.
Yeah.
The cementitious or mineral plaster will cost you less than acrylic.
Okay.
At the risk of probably annoying every plasterer from we're sitting to the end of the islands, anywhere from $250 to $350 a square metre.
Okay.
And possibly a little more if it's like a complicated site. We're using the acrylics.
Thanks, Arthur. And if our listeners want to find out more about the Enviro panel cladding system, where can they head?
You can go to mpb.co.nz. You can get hold of a mason's technical or specification manager. You can get hold of myself or, just reach out to us. We'll do our best. If you've got plans drawn up, let us know. We can get them to some plasterers to get priced up. If you're a specifier or a developer that's considering systems like this, talk to us. We'll do our best to give you the information you need.
Thank you so much. Amazing. So today we've explored the ins and the outs of the Mason's Enviro cladding system. It's clear that modern cladding isn't just about aesthetics. It's about moisture control, thermal performance, and long-term durability. So when you approach it as a coordinated system and you reduce risk, you enhance performance and create healthier, more comfortable spaces for the people living there. Thanks for joining us and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Masons Podcast. We hope you've gained some practical insights and ideas for your next project. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and visit us at mpb.co.nz for more information on our product systems and solutions. And join us next time as we continue to explore smarter ways and solutions for building in New Zealand.
podcast is for general information only. While we aim to provide accurate details on building products and systems, Masons is not liable for reliance on this content. Always follow product specifications, manufacturer's instructions, and relevant building codes.